Welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts. And today I think we're going to be some little interesting things and maybe some shocking things that we're going to talk about today. The first thing we're going to talk about is it's an article in the Wall Street Journal by Michael Phillips. And when I was reading the article, and it dawned on me, I don't think many people realize or really understand what has happened since September 11, 2001. It was an article about Marines in Afghanistan. And basically, the newest Marines that are going to Afghanistan are 19, 20 years old. And we always look you up, 19, 20, the young always fight the wars. But put it in perspective, the article was talking about that the majority of these Marines who are going to Afghanistan right now were 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old in 2011. Some of them were from 3rd to 5th graders. A lot of them were 4th graders in September 11th. So they've gone all the way through school, have graduated out of high school, or in Afghanistan. Never in the history of our country has it been spread out so long, because even Vietnam, you didn't have this 10-year thing. World War II, World War I, Civil War. In Afghanistan is going on and on and on, and the president just signed another 10-year commitment, which will take us to 2024. And so, just 2024, so basically a second lieutenant going to Afghanistan in 2024, even thought he may go as a trainer, would not have even been born when September 11th happened. So just wanted to put that a little bit in perspective. And one of the other ones, it was in December, shortly before the battalion shipped out for Afghanistan, Bravo Company Commander Brent Jones gathered his 170 men outside their brick headquarters building at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. A Jacksonville, North Carolina native, the 33-year-old Captain Jones was waiting for a slot at the Marine Corps Officers Candidate School. He was a senior in college, 11 years early, waiting to go to Officers Candidate School. By the time he took command of Bravo Company, he already had been to 4 combat tours. And so, what are we going to do for that individual? So he's been in the Marine Corps basically 10 years. He has 4 combat tours under his belt, probably some as platoon commander. Now he's going to Afghanistan again as a company commander. And hopefully he'll make it back. And he may make it back with no physical wounds. The question is, what is his mental wounds are going to be? What is his psyche wounds are going to be? What are the wounds on for his family? Basically, so here's his 5th tour. And normally in the Marine Corps, that's 7-month times. So basically, when he gets back from 2002 to 2012, he would have spent 35 months in combat, almost 4 years in combat. That's a lot of what we're asking of our young men. Or we talk about the 1%ers. These are the half of 1%ers. These are the ones that are doing a hell of a lot, and they come home, and chances of them getting a good paying job, it's pretty slim, because they're going to say, wait a minute, you spent four years in combat, how can I trust you? And plus, most people don't even know anybody who served in a combat zone, let alone, know people in the military, let alone a combat zone. So again, that was just for public information and to get people thinking. Now part onto the political one. From Brunswick, Maine. Former Governor August King of Maine wants to run for the Senate, taking Olympia Snow's, Senator Olympia Snow's place. Olympia Snow was the one who got up and said, hey, I've had enough of it. Both of these parties are not working. I just don't want to put up with it. It just isn't fair. The government is basically self-destructing. Olympia Snow has been a moderate Republican, and she's voted her conscience all the time. Not always liked by the Republican Party because they feel that she's a rhino, Republican in name only. not really liked by the Democratic Party because they wanted her to vote the same way all the time. And so, again, she was from the, as we put it this way, the old school where looking out for the people were much more important for looking out for the party. And basically, August King, he's going to run as an independent. He is plain and simple. He's had enough. He was independent governor of Maine, and now he wants to become an independent senator. And right now, he has a 70% favorability rate against a 16% who views him negatively. The problem is the Republicans want to keep the seat because they want to try to take control of the Senate. The Democrats are not really happy with him either because he won't commit to vote for a Democrat. And so me, if I would get running for Senate, I don't think I could commit to vote for Harry Reid. Plus, you know what, I want quality leadership, and I think that's what the former Governor Angus King is looking for. And he said, put it this way, one of the people after talking to King, he says, "We weren't founded by Republicans and Democrats. We were founded by people who opposed tyranny, and now we have two parties who have become their own little tyrannies." And so Governor King says he would be on guard for attacks from opponents who use outside groups that are nominally independent to deflect responsibility. And so again, Democrats and Republicans, they have these, as a result of the Supreme Court decision, has these PACs and everything, and quote, that can attack people, and they go, wait a minute, you know, we really don't want that. We have nothing to do with it. It's someone else. And it goes, a fisherman told Mr. King that the population of striped bass was coming back and that the fleet should be allowed to start hauling them in. Mr. King responded that as long as I was governor, no one would be fishing stripers in Maine. That was because, plain and simple, the stock is pretty depleted, and now they were trying to rebound, and they said, let's go take more. And the gentleman replied, his bluntness did not win him friends, but it won him votes. The fisherman agreed. I disagree with you, but I will vote for you, said the 53-year-old fisherman. So here's a fisherman who counted on his livelihood as part of these fishing stripers off the coast of Maine, was important to his livelihood and his family's well-being, and he wanted the governor to say, nope, allow us to fish more. And the governor said no, point blank to his face, said no, we're not going to allow that to happen. And the gentleman said, I don't agree with you because I'm going to vote, but I will vote for you because you're being honest. You're not placating me or, you know, make me feel good and then turn around and say, hey, I had to do this. This is an independent individual that stood up and said, no, this is the reason why, and bingo, and he stood by his word. And so, again, I think that's what a lot of the American people want. They want to have leaders who are going to be totally honest with us, not worrying about reading the party line or going by the talking points that these parties put out. Plain and simple, I hate it, and I'm pretty sure most of you hate it, when someone comes in and they have a talking point, and they go talking point after talking point after talking point, and then when you get ready to ask them the question, they're already heading out the door and say, sorry, we got to move on. So you feel like you've been taken to the cleaners. Or you go to a press rally, bang, bang, and they already have their certain people ready to ask really softball questions. They ask 3 or 4 times up. Plain and simple, we need individuals like Governor King, who's just going to sit there and he's going to listen to you and he's going to give you an honest answer, and you know why he's giving you the answer. And so I'm not endorsing Governor King. I've met him a couple of times, but to me, that's leadership. That's the type of individuals I would like to run. I could care whether they were Democrat, Republican, Independent. I just want quality individuals that can be honest with me and don't appease me. Don't think that I'm not very intelligent. Now let's go to some of the nastiest stuff that's going on concerning our finances. Got a number of articles over at CNBC, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and it says one was Bernanke to Congress. We're much closer to total destruction than you think. He goes, if lawmakers don't confront them, they will find themselves confronted by them. Again, we're in this season. No one wants to make really tough decisions because no one wants to risk their re-election or even election. So plain and simple, the American people, you know what? Let's feed them some lines here and there because we know that the American people are not going to think about all this stuff. We can go and tell them nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about. Everything is going to get better. You just re-elect me and everything will be better. And so as we keep looking at the last few elections, I don't know. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. They keep telling us, you elect me, everything will get better. I don't know. If this is getting better, maybe I need to find someone that's going to make it much worse. Bernanke's prepared remark, by definition, the unsustainable trajectory of deficit and debt that the CBO outlines cannot actually happen because creditors will not be willing to lend to a government with debt relative to national income that is rising without limit. One way or another, fiscal adjustments significant to stabilize the federal budget must occur at some point. The question is whether these adjustments will take place through a careful and deliberate process that weighs priorities and gives people adequate time to adjust to changes in the government program or tax policies, or whether the needed fiscal adjustments will come as rapid and painful response to a looming or actual fiscal crisis. And so, again, they're coming. Plain and simple. It's just like any of us at our budget. If we're looking at a checking account, we're looking at our monthly statements, and we can see sooner or later, even just paying minimum payments, we're going to run out of money or we won't even have the ability to pay those minimum payments. It's coming. We can go, wait a minute, we'll wait and hope something will get better. But sooner or later, it gets to the point, it's a disaster, and we go, why did this have to happen to us? When if we sat down and looked out, what could I have done 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months ago? Maybe I don't go out to eat as much. Maybe I don't go buy a new car. Maybe I don't go and pay $120, $130 a month for my cable or satellite. Maybe I don't get the iPad, the iPhone 5 or 4.5 or whatever it is because it looks cool. But and so there were so many different ways that we could have prevented it or mitigated it. But we don't, and the government is just feeding us a line that it can't happen, we're going to do pretty good. Plus, Bernanke explained that the Congressional Budget Office calculation missed an important reality. As the government debt and deficit rises, the economy will slow down, an effect not taken into account by the CBO. So for an instance, when the CBO says that federal spending for healthcare programs will roughly double as a percentage of GPD in the next 25 years, it's probably being too optimistic. If debt keeps rising, GDP will become much lower than CBO is estimated, which means the healthcare spending will be a much larger percentage of the overall economy. That's one of the benefits of the Congressional Budget Office, and that's one of the benefits that the politicians can turn around and go and say. So the CBO or the president can say, well, for the next 10 years, we're going to have an increase of the GDP by 3.5%. And because as it goes up each year, 3.5%, then they go and look at the tax records and say, okay, as it's going up, it's going to generate so much more revenue. And so if we go in and do the little rule, they would have a rule of 72. And so basically, you divide 3 into 72. So if you round off 7 dividing it. So basically, say over 20 years, our debt or whatever our economy is expected to, at 3.5% is expected to double. So basically, if in 2012 it's $16 trillion, and in 2032 they would expect it to be $32 trillion. So as the cost of healthcare goes up, they would say it's only going to be 25%. Well, but like what happened this quarter, where we only had like a 2.2. Well, what happens is basically we're still counting on that 3.5 increase in all the revenue and taxes coming in. Well, actually, we're only getting 2.2, so we're losing 1.3, or basically we're losing almost a third of what we expected to bring in. And so, but the CBO is not adjusting that change. So the gap gets bigger and bigger each year. And so as people go in and say, I can't get a pay raise, or the interest rates go up, or I have this problem, I am now spending money on non-productive things, which then has a negative effect on the growth rate. So it just becomes a really vicious cycle. But again, it's counted on that we, the average person, have no idea how economics works. And hopefully I'm not making it confusing. I'm trying to keep it basic. And Bernanke had earlier said that one of his major priorities was getting the stock market numbers up. And so you can make money in the stock market while everyone else don't have their jobs and all this other kind of stuff, because United States, I think, U.S. corporations made more money overseas than they did in the United States. So if the United States economy doesn't get up to 70% of consumer driven, these companies can still go overseas and go to China, go to Russia, go to India, and still make up the drop off in the U.S. market and still make profits. But while we as the Americans do not. And say, sustained high rates of government borrowing will both drain funds away from private investment and increase our debt to foreigners with adverse long-run effects on U.S. output, incomes, and standard of living. Moreover, diminishing investor confidence that deficits will be brought under control will ultimately lead to sharper rising interest rates on the government debt and potentially to broader financial turmoil. In a vicious circle, high and rising interest rates would cause debt service payments on the federal government to grow even faster, resulting in further increases in the debt to GDP ratio and making fiscal adjustments all that more difficult. It's kind of like going for a home loan. If the bank says you can't have no more than 30% of your monthly payments going out to bills to qualify for a home. So if we continue and all of a sudden we as a federal government have 60, 70, or 80% of our income committed, why would a bank want to, or a foreign company want to give us a loan? And that becomes the question. Then you become high risk. Or, quote, you'll get a subprime loan where you may have to pay 9% while someone could get a prime at 3%. So as it goes up, we as the people are going to have to pay more and more. And so another article, it goes, the fiscal cliff, in terms we've been hearing more and more about at the end of the year, that's when $500 billion worth of tax cuts, spending boosts go by the wayside, probably dragging U.S. economy into the abyss of another recession. There's 4 items coming up that that people have not talked about. The Bush tax cuts, which were extended under President Obama, expire at the end of the year. So we as a nation have to go and count on what is going to happen in the 7 weeks after the presidential election. Is Congress going to do something? Are they going to allow them to expire before the new Congress is sworn in, which I think is January 3rd, or do they come up to a way to keep it going? The other part is the payroll tax cut, the extra 2 cents off. Okay, that's expected to end. Okay, other parts, the the $1.2 trillion that's supposed to kick in automatic cuts, that kicks in. Is Congress going to find a way to mitigate how it goes? Are they going to become weakness and say, nope, we're going to do this instead of this? We're going to find ways to jumble the numbers? Well, Congress has a really good way to do it. The question is, depends on who takes over Congress, who takes over the Senate. And so that's one of the reasons why August King of Maine becomes pretty important. But there's another big problem that's coming up in that time frame, is that the president and the Republicans, they miscalculated. And they miscalculated pretty seriously, because there's a good possibility that a week or two prior or the week or two after the election, we'll hit our debt limit ceiling. And so do we go through the big rigmarole that we did last year, trying to increase the debt limit? Do we go in and, as members of Congress, do that fancy thing and go, okay, Mr. President, you can have this increase, and then later on, you can get an automatic $1.2 trillion, I think it was $1.2 trillion increase in the debt limit, but we'll reserve the right to go and say, we don't agree with this, Congress. The Congress will reserve the right that we don't agree with this, Mr. President, but then, Mr. President, you can still do it. Again, another political ploy to say, hey, I voted against the debt increase, and it was the president who took it. Well, that's bull, because you voted for the debt increase, which then allowed you to vote against the debt increase, so you can go to the electorate and say, hey, I voted against the debt increase. Plain and simple. So all this happened and no one did their job. And so they didn't do their job, and now we're getting closer and closer to $16 trillion in debt. And so J.P. Morgan goes, we do not see the doomsday scenario playing out. Policymakers are unlikely to drive the U.S. economy off the fiscal cliff, said J.P. Morgan economist Michael Farrell. Said in analysis, nevertheless, the fiscal policy will continue to be a drag on the economy next year. For a firm that does not believe the worst of the off-the-cliff scenario will come to pass, J.P. Morgan has done extensive analysis of its ramifications. And what their conclusion was, it says, the doomsday scenario, the end result will be a buying opportunity. Again, like I was saying earlier, the stock market can go up in a bad economy because people can still make profits. Here it is, J.P. Morgan is looking at all this worst stuff that can possibly happen if the political leaders don't have the moral courage to do the right thing. And so what they've done is they're going to find ways for their clients to make money, and make a lot of money, if doomsday comes in. And again, here's the other part that would really tick off a lot of people. Their wealthy clients will make a lot of money, and it won't be earned income, it will be capital gains, and they will be paying at a much lower rate than it's been earned income. So if I have money and I make $5 million in the doomsday, under the doomsday scenario, and it's all capital gains, and I think the capital gains rate is like 15%, so that will then frustrate people, because you and I, the average person, is not going to have the ability to get these financial advisors and able to make money. It goes, we anticipate the market will show a smaller aptitude reaction to the political drama developing around the U.S. fiscal cliff, said Thomas L. Lee, J.P. Morgan's chief market strategist. The fiscal cliff is enormous, but there is significant common ground to expect that this will be delayed. Again, J.P. Morgan, their head guy, their chief marketing strategy, he's not saying we're not going to make the fiscal cliff. All he is saying is to expect much of this to be delayed. he is looking at this. JP Morgan is saying, yeah, maybe these guys will get to it and prevent the fiscal cliff from happening now. He has trust that the fiscal cliff is going to happen. And so what JP Morgan is doing is we will find a way to make money for our clients during this delay. And again, in certain ways, if it happens, we really kind of have to blame ourselves and we're going to suffer, and because we don't want our politicians to look us straight in the face and give us an answer. To me, I look at the American people, the American psyche. We can solve almost any problem as long as people tell us how bad the problem is and give us the alternatives of not doing it. But nope, they don't want to give us the alternatives. It goes, if politicians consider to dither, investors will view the fiscal cliff as a major economic and political threat to growth and one that would warrant a higher risk premium in the valuation of equities, higher bond yields, and other risk assets. So, plain and simple, and lower your credit rating, the more interest you have to pay for a car loan, the more interest you have to pay for a home loan. And as he finishes up, it says, in 2012, the fiscal cliff carries enormous economic consequences, but is unlikely to trigger a financial crisis, Lee said. Of course, we ultimately expect some form of can kicking, but even if this comes during the final week of December before action, we expect markets to become more comfortable with the notion that this is not the financial crisis of 2011. So that's all we're going to do is, we have complete faith. Wall Street and these other big investment firms and banks say, hey, we have complete faith that, they'll find a way in the last week in December to come up with a situation how we can kick the can down the road. And the only way you can kick the can down the road is basically like going out and getting another credit card with a new line of credit and writing a check from your new credit card line of credit at a high interest rate to pay all your payments due on your old one. And instead of having 2 credit cards, you have 3 credit cards and your interest rate's higher and you haven't paid anything down. And we had one, this is where I go into really kind of the disgusting part. Not a discussion, but a disgusting part as being, it's a sick part. And there was one, October 26, 2011. What would the United States economy look like if it was debt-free? Members of the Clinton administration pondered this question in an unpublished report titled Life After Debt during Clinton's final year in office. It was an NPR. Well, in 2000, the annual budget ran a deficit. The deficit had begun to shrink. Had the government committed to collecting more than it spent, the government would have paid off its debt by 2012. We were on track at the end of 2000 as a nation to be debt-free this year. Just think, instead of being debt-free this year, we're $16 trillion in debt. So how do you, when you're looking at that, someone's made some decisions that cost us $16 trillion of debt and almost $300 million a year, and even going higher every year forward in interest. And the debt getting higher and higher. If we have a good year coming forward, we'll only add $1 trillion onto the debt. He explained that an end to the national debt would bring an end to U.S. Treasury bonds. Thought the possibility seemed rather benign. The Treasury bonds actually play a huge role in the global and national economy. Internationally, these bonds are believed to be so safe that much of the world has come to depend on them. The U.S. Treasury bond is a pillar of global economy. The Federal Reserve buys and sells Treasury bonds to keep the U.S. economy stable. Banks buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth of them. Even the money collected from people's paychecks for Social Security is invested in Treasury bonds. He goes, thus asking the Social Security money, give me. If there's no Treasury bonds, what do you invest in? The Life After Death report was meant to include the Clintons' official economic report of the president. It was deemed too speculative and too politically sensitive by high-ranking members of the Clinton staff. And basically goes, at the end of the article, it says, perhaps a little debt is a good thing. Well, I had done some research earlier, and Alan Greenspan, when he was the Fed chairman, said, well, when he changed and he recommended to President Bush that he authorize the tax cuts, because he felt that if we had paid off the debt, the federal government may buy up some stuff, and he didn't want the federal government to spend the money on, quote, private stuff, things that should have stayed in the private sector. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist and all this other kind of stuff, but, and I'm not a fan of Ron Paul, but there are part of the things with Ron Paul's asking about the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of people asking about the Federal Reserve. Yes, the purpose of the Federal Reserve is to basically stabilize the United States economy, but the Federal Reserve is made up of member banks, and their number one priority, like any corporation, is to make money. And so the question is, if the federal government paid off its debt, how would the banks make money off the government? The question is, are we as the taxpayers supposed to have a debt so the Treasury can sell bonds to people overseas to bring money in? So are we as a nation supposed to financially support the rest of the world? So I was able to get a copy of Life After Debt report, and it's called Preliminary and Closed Hold Official Use Only. And I've got copied of the email system, the benefit of the government required to keep the email. And basically, this email was sent to Douglas Amador, Treasury Department, Lee Sachs, Treasury. There's 5 of the people from the Treasury, and it goes, Chad, attaches some comments. Could you give me the earliest possible reading as to whether you intend to retain this section? If you do, then I would once again strongly advise, as I mentioned to Martin on Friday, that you get Gene's affirmative approval of this section. This is quite different from interpreting the absence of a negative reaction as escalants. Also, I will want, in that case, to get Larry's affirmation approval. Finally, you should solicit comments from my colleagues in domestic finance. They will come at these questions from a different direction than I. I am herewith taking the liberty of transmitting my annotated copy to Gary and Lee. And part of it, I got the first 14 pages. We must realize, however, that the sharp reduction in federal debt and the possible accumulation of federal assets raised to at least 3 important issues. First, investors looking for assets free of risk can no longer count on an abundant supply of U.S. Treasury securities. The Treasury securities will no longer provide a reliable benchmark for other interest rates. Second, the Federal Reserve may have to change the mechanism on which it conducts monetary policies. Third, continuous surplus after public debt is paid off will require the federal government to require assets either directly or through the Social Security Trust Fund. So, one, the first priority they're worrying about, the first possible problem is for providing for investors an asset free of credit risk. Again, is that in the best interest of the American people, or is that in the best interest of foreign governments who can come in and say, we can buy the Federal Reserve Fund, the Treasury, and we have no risk whatsoever? The Treasury securities will no longer provide a reliable benchmark for other interest rates. Again, that would be the controlling of interest rates. And third, the continuous surplus after public debt had been paid off. We required the Fed, the government, to require assets either directly or through the Social Security Trust Fund. So if we paid all this stuff off, we would then basically be reversing the Social Security Trust Fund, again, extending the life of the Social Security Trust Fund. And so just looking at the stuff, in fact, since the Treasury buyback program began, the swap market has taken on some of the benchmark roles of Treasuries in providing a benchmark interest rate for relative comparison. So again, we did not have to sell Treasury bonds to be able to determine what the interest rates were going to be. Of course, it's possible to keep both the benchmark Treasury and allow fiscal surplus to continue to pay down the national debt. This would require that we diversify Social Security Trust Fund investment options and concerns therefore described below. Under the scenario, the trust fund will invest in something other than Treasury, while the federal government could maintain its current fiscal policy and public market for Treasury instruments. The Treasury could solve the Fed short-term problems without involving Social Security Trust Fund by creating a further federal investment fund to save for future financial demands. Basically, the Federal Reserve would face a dilemma how to implement monetary policies. The debt held by the public comprises holdings by the Federal Reserve, foreign government, and private investors. Thus, this is a debt scheduled for elimination by 2012. So again, 2012, this year, if we had continued on the path that we had in 1999 and 2000, all the public debt owned by the Federal Reserve, foreign government, and private investors would have been paid off before the end of this year. So you sit there and you go, why? Why? On January 5th, 2000, in order to help preserve the market for treasuries, the Federal Reserve placed caps on the amount of individual treasuries issued it would purchase. And you go and you just look at some of the stuff that was in here. The Treasury securities is in the conduct of monetary policy by creating new, very low-risk securities constructed from a pool of private debt securities. Such securities will be packaged in a way similar to mortgage-based securities currently issued by the government-sponsored enterprise like Fannie Mae and Fannie Mac. And you go in, so again, beating the dead horse, we would have paid all this stuff off, and instead of having zero debt, we have $16 trillion debt. Instead of us owing no money to the Fed, I think the last one is printed like $2.4 trillion in assets, in basically printed money. And they've also bought hundreds of billions of dollars of mortgage-backed securities from Fannie and Freddie. And so basically there's about $3 trillion, okay, that we would not have owned or been created. So it's really kind of almost a $20 trillion difference. And regardless of how the Fed proceeds, by 2012, the public debt will be retired according to current projections, leaving the government with net receipts above expenditures. In order to deal with financial obligations mid-century, the government may choose to save and indeed invest this surplus. We right now are looking, quote, as financial obligation in 2030, 2040, 2050. And so in the year 2000, if everything had gone, we hadn't done the major tax cuts, we hadn't gone to war without raising taxes to pay for it, we would have been out of debt this year, and we would have been saving money to take care of the Social Security problems, the Medicare problems, and a lot of other problems that were coming at us in the year 2030, 2040, 2050. And so, as discussed earlier, one prudent strategy for addressing the long-term demographic challenge is to continue paying down the debt and evidently building up a federal assets from which we can meet future obligations. But what specific kind of investment should the federal government hold, and what issues of management are likely to be important? And so I sit there and I go, you know, this is where we do not have the political courage. We do not have leadership. This is where we have people from both parties going in and making decisions that affect you, me, and all of us based on self-interest. And I don't care whether it's Democrat or it's Republican. Plain and simple, in 2000, President Clinton's people, Treasury, Reserve, all this stuff came up with this report. And it's Life After Death. It's a second interagency draft, November 3rd, 2000. And they had basically said it was just too politically sensitive. Politically sensitive. But wait a minute. So politically sensitivity, we were worrying about winning the election in 2000, that we were willing to cause the government to go up to, instead of paying off its debt, to where we're in right now at about a $20 trillion problem. Again, President Bush took over. He looked at this numbers. Alan Greenspan came and said, you know what, President, you don't want to pay off this debt. We're going to have a problem. What are we going to do? The federal government may end up investing in the private economy so they could save money to pay off serious bills that demographics were going to cause in 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050. That's really a bad idea, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, come up with these tax cuts. Not once, but twice. 2 sets of tax cuts. And then, okay, Mr. President, you can go to war, and don't worry, there is so much money available that you don't even have to raise taxes to go to war. And it kind of goes with Enron, where they go and say, these are the smartest men in the room. It seems that whether you look at Wall Street, you look at political parties, you look at economists, the smartest men in the room, well, men and women in the room, don't seem to be looking out as our best interests, and they're making decisions that an average person would go and say, no, where's the common sense? It doesn't make sense whatsoever. So what we're going to do is, now that I've talked a little bit about how the Fed and all these things are happening and how we're going to pay the price, we're going to kind of shift over to the whiteboard. And on the whiteboard, I can make you angry. And when I was putting this down before, Ernie was looking at these numbers and he wasn't really too happy either. But you know what? This is an opportunity to save money, not to get shafted. One of the reasons the economy is going down and it's not growing, it's saying is that the American people are just not spending money. They need to spend more money. They need to take out more loans. Well, the average American person, I think, has a great deal of common sense, and they're going, something is wrong here. Okay, this first part over here, anybody who has a credit card debt, or say you have one for J.C. Penney's or Home Depot, and a couple of years ago, I redid my house, the siding and all this other kind of stuff. I went and bought some stuff from Home Depot, most of that stuff, and I'm paying it down. And one of the things that Home Depot did after the financial crisis is they increased my interest rate by 7%. And I know they did it to a heck of a lot of people. I've heard of people who have gone, the interest rate went from 9.14 up to 29%, which they decided they could do. And they give you a piece of paper and says, hey, if you don't like it, just tell us you don't like it. we'll close your account and you just keep paying your bill. Well, they close your account, that doesn't help your credit rating. And so you get stuck. And so on my, for example, Home Depot bill, there's a little box that's new one. It says my minimum payment is $144 a month, okay? And it goes and says, Mr. Roberts, you pay $144 a month and it will only take you 18 years to pay it off, okay? That's pretty close to, well, I was doing numbers, pretty close to about $30,000. They say it's only about $13,000. But they go, Mr. Roberts, if you pay $38 a month more, you will pay it off in 3 years. Just think, $38, 36, so 36 months of basically an additional $38 cuts 15 years off my bill, and I can pay it off. So an easy way to just look at it, if you use a calculator, so I pay this, just think of $144 a month, basically $1,700 a year for 15 years that I would have to pay really to cover up the, cover the cost of the interest. You know, I'm just oversimplifying it. That number doesn't come out really exactly, but look at the difference. Plain and simple, that's why the credit card companies don't want you to pay anything more than your minimum. They're really nice and they're happy when you pay your minimums. But for $38, so if I go out to eat with my wife and my kids, one less grandkids, one time a month less, I take 15 years off my payments to Home Depot. But that means that's $38 that I'm not spending in the community. And so that's what the American people are doing. They're looking at these numbers and they're going, wait a minute, I'm not going to pay 15 extra years for nothing. Now, another part which goes on that they don't like to tell you, my daughter just graduated from nursing school Saturday, really proud of her. It was a long haul, you know, working full time, taking care of her two children and going to school. And I know there was days that she was dragging. So I've been putting money away for her so she can go on a vacation after she graduated. I got the statement in today, and the interest rate on the savings account is 0.9%. So for $100, if I kept $100 in an account for her, at the end of the year, she will increase by 90 cents, not even $1. And I go, okay. Now, if she had a credit card at 24%, I took that $100 instead of putting into savings. I could save her, again, just doing it simple interest, nothing fancy, I would save her $24. So when I take the part of putting in a savings bank for 90 cents or paying her credit card down $100, that's a difference of $23.10. So again, keeping it basic, so that means by paying $100 on a credit card, my return is 23.1%. Where in the world can you get 23.1% on your return on your money? The best way to get return on your money in today's economy isn't going out and buying, isn't going out and saving, or isn't going out and getting CD. It's paying off your credit card debt. People are listening to Howard Clark and other ones and saying, hey, pay down the debt. When you're paying down your debt, you're actually paying yourself. And so when you look at that and you compare it to this, it's really not, yes, you're supposed to be out there and get about 6%, 6 months emergency money. But the question is, if you get your 6 months emergency money, the really best way to get your money is pay off the debt, and you're saving yourself all kinds of money. And it's the old Benjamin Franklin, a penny saved is a penny earned. In this case, it's dollars earned. Again, You know how you go to Walmart or J.C. Penney's or Target or Macy's or any of these stores and says, hey, apply for a new credit card. You get this new credit card and you can get 10% off anything you buy today. And a lot of people go, wow, 10% off, this is really good. I can get this and I can buy it. So for example, if you do Macy's, Macy's is 24.99%. There's their standard interest rate. So now, mostly all these companies have created their own banks. And so if the bank, say Macy's Bank, or you've probably seen it, Retail's National Bank, that works through a lot of them, or American Express Bank that does it. So if I'm the bank and I go in and borrow $100 from the Fed at 2.5%, I have to pay $2.50 for it. So I didn't give you this credit card at 10% off your first day. You go out and buy it. Well, for every $100 that you put on, and I charge you 24%, I make $24. So basically, what I'm doing is for every $100 that you spend, I make $21.50 just profit on interest. That ain't counting the profit on the product. And so, again, these are just some of the fancy games that you can that gets played with. I got two members from the Fed. One of the Fed presidents says, we can only have one policy, and that policy is designed to support the recovery. So unfortunately, there are winners and losers. And according to the Fed policy, the banks are the winners and we are the losers. And so again, as we get ready for the next election, I don't care, Democrat, Republican, you need to ask whoever's running for office, what are you going to do to change this? What are you going to do in the government to make us the winners and make someone else the losers? These guys took the risk and they're winning. A lot of us are hardworking, we follow the rules, and we're losing. It is time for that to change. And so, again, I'm going to get off my high horse. You know, sorry about all the bad news, but it's just information that you can use. And so, see you out there on the long road, and have a good month of May, and hopefully the weather gets better, and work on your tan. Thank you.